Hello all, we are sharing CV and MNHCV data on monthly basis. Thank you all for your positive feedbacks. Many professionals were asking about future of CV industry. The reasons are well known because of the last year downturn and this year's COVID situation. So we have invited Mr. Shyam Maller, who is expert in CV industry. Mr. Shyam Maller is veteran and he has worked for almost 30 years in various companies like Tata Motors, Volvo, Eicher, Concord Motors and various other companies. So he'll be sharing concerns, he'll be sharing the green pockets and various other insights. I want to thank Mr. Shyam for taking out his time and sharing his valuable knowledge. So let us hear from Mr. Shyam. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you for your introduction. I will structure my presentation into two parts. One is on the macroeconomy, and the second is on the issues facing the industry, and in particular, the CV industry. I'll begin on a very somber note. All of us know about the global pandemic and the devastating effect it has had on the world economy, and India too has not been spared in this either. The health crisis is one, and of course, the loss of thousands of lives that we've had. The impact on businesses is colossal. We all know the impact it has had on sectors like aviation, hospitality, retail, and even automotive and education. So this has been quite a really serious issue that we've not seen in many, many decades or in our lifetimes as of now. The world economy is expected to contract for the year 2021 anywhere between 4.9% to 5.2%. Even the Indian GDP, I think there are multiple estimates which are talking about the contraction of the Indian GDP from anywhere between, I would say, 3.2% to about 9.5%. 9.5% is the contraction that ICRA has recently projected. Just to set the background, we had a GDP growth in India in the year 1819 of about 6.1%. It dropped down to 4.2% in the year which just went by, which is the year 1920. And of course, now we are staring at a GDP contraction, which means a negative GDP of almost close to about 9.5%, which is the worst case scenario which ICRA has projected for the financial year 2020-2021. That's how it is. So let me quote another recent survey that has been done by PwC, the management consulting firm. It was titled Value Conservation to Value Creation. And here industry leaders have said, 80% of them have said that the businesses are expected to come back to normalcy sometime in June 2021. And of course, they also say it with a caveat that the businesses are expected to start picking up from September 20, which is a couple of months from now. That's a little bit of a good news, so to speak. As the Unlock 3.0 kicks in, we do hope that things will turn out to be for the better. So let me try and paint the picture in terms of what the macroeconomic factors, or what is it that we can see in the Indian context. The inflation is expected to remain very high. We have seen that it was 6.1% in the month of June. And part of it is fueled by the rising prices of both petrol and diesel, which we have seen in the last month, so to speak. The credit growth, which is basically the non-food credit growth that comes into the industry, also has been declining. It was low. Banks are now extremely cautious in terms of lending. You're all aware of the fact that they have been asked to extend this moratorium. So they are very apprehensive on what the situation is going to be post August 31st. So this is staring them in their face. From a company perspective, we see that a lot of companies are under stress, and rightly so. With hardly any sales happening, the revenues are not kicking in. They're all worried about their capacity utilizations. The capacity utilization which we see, at least in the automotive industry, could be anywhere between 30% to about 60%. 30 to 40% would probably be in the commercial vehicle industry, and it would probably be in the region of about 60 to 70% as what is being said in the two-wheeler industry, which has started showing good numbers from the month of June onwards. So I think this is going to be clearly something which the companies will need to uh, recognize, and of course many of them are already working since the month of April in terms of how to reduce their fixed costs. Having said that, there are some positives and there are some green shoots which we must acknowledge. One, of course, India's this season has been blessed with good monsoons. I think we will expect the good Kharif crop as such, and we do believe that there will be a vibrant rural oblique semi-urban economy. The Bharat, that is, as what it is called, is already giving good results, especially for the FMCG companies, and we are also seeing that the two-wheelers, which have seen good sales in the month of June, the demand has broadly come or mainly come from basically the rural towns and things like that. The second important area where we are seeing these green shoots is that the GST collections in the month of June have come close to the 1 lakh crore mark, which is typically the run rate which was seen last year in the pre-COVID situation. Again, a good sign. NHAI toll collections in the month of June have apparently come close to about 70 to 80% of the pre-COVID levels, which again is a good sign that trucks are being, seen running on the highways, and that's a good sign. And I also mentioned about the pickup of FMCG and the two-wheelers, particularly in rural and semi-urban markets. We also see now more and more businesses gradually open up. From an automotive perspective, we see that about 80 to 90% of the dealerships are now open. The interest rates that today a customer can enjoy for availing a loan is much lower than probably what it was last year, so which also is a very, very good sign. And particularly in the month of June, we have seen that there has been a slower contraction in both manufacturing as well as services growth, so to speak. And I would think that the month of July would probably be even better, which means that slowly the negative impact of these industries slowing down would start petering out, which actually is a good thing. And the Unlock 3.0 has been announced just a couple of days ago, and we would see that with more and more industries opening up, we would hope to see that the migrant labor comes back to work, and now the industries have been allowed to work with 75% plus workforce, which also I think is a good thing from a perspective of the output. And of course, in this kind of a backdrop, industry does have, and in particularly the automotive industry has a certain expectation, and which has not been forthcoming for a while. First of all, when the 12 lakh crore economic stimulus that was unleashed, the automotive industry was singled out for not being given anything substantial. So I think the scrappage policy is something which the industry is eagerly looking forward to, and I think that is something which I think the industry will value. Of course, from my personal perspective, I do believe that a temporary reduction of the GST from 28% to 18%, at least for the period of, let's say, the next 6-7 months, would have a much bigger impact than probably what even the scrappage policy would have, because one doesn't really know as to what will be the kind of conditions and clauses that would be there in terms of making this scrappage policy very effective, so to speak. The truck and the bus operators are in intense pain. As you can imagine, the last 4 or 5 months, they've literally had no business. And they would certainly be looking at some element of waivers of, as what we have heard about, the road tax on the insurance premium and things like that. This certainly needs to be listened to. And last but not the least is even the dealerships, the dealership fraternity, which has been undergoing almost negligible sales in the last 4 months, and I'm talking about from April to July. I would imagine that the month of August would be probably a little better than July, and maybe September would slowly start picking up. These people will also require a certain element of support. I think some of the OEMs have come forward and extended a helping hand, but I would think that they would need to do probably more than what has been done. I think this will go a long way in terms of what we need to have for a very vibrant automotive industry. Thank you. Now, coming to the automotive industry, which consists of passenger vehicles, commercial vehicles, two-wheelers and three-wheelers, just to set the context and why it's an important barometer for India's GDP and India's economy, really, so to speak. It constitutes 7.5% of India's GDP. It employs about 37 million people. 49% of the manufacturing GDP is from the automotive sector. The automotive sector is valued at about 118 billion US dollars. And as a subset of this, the auto component industry, which is extremely closely linked to the automotive industry, is about 57 billion dollars, US dollars, so to speak. And to talk about going back in time in the year which ended March 20, which is for the fiscal FY19 to FY19 to 20, basically 717,000 commercial vehicles were sold. And in this, if you were to really do a stratification of this, the MNHCV industry dropped by about 52%, which means from about 300,000 units, which was there in 18-19, came down to about 141,000 units. Light commercial vehicles dropped by 30%. They dropped to about 82,000 units from about 117,000 units. The small commercial vehicles dropped by 20%. Exports dropped by about 35%. So this was basically the backdrop of where we started the financial year 2020-2021. And what contributed to the industry in the year FY 19-20 to be low went back as early as, I would say, the month of September or so, when the axle loading norms revision got intimated. And that clearly was a showstopper where the industries started contracting because the same truck could carry at least about 18 to 20% higher payload than probably what it used to do prior to that. And this was applicable even for vehicles that were already running on the roads. The second thing was the BS4 BS6 transition also was its own, had created its own on-off kind of a situation in terms of whether there'll be a pre-buy or no buy, so to speak. But then in the backdrop of the slowing economy, we saw that the pre-buy literally never happened, except probably in some sectors like the MNHCV buses, particularly in the coach segment, where some operators bought the BS4 models to escape the BS6 pricing, so to speak. And we all know that the year ended 1920, the GDP dropped to about 4.2%. Now coming to FY 2020-21, ICRA has done a study which got recently released, and the forecast that they've given is quite scary. And I think we need to take cognizance of this and really work very hard towards finding measures as to how do we sustain this drop. They are talking about a drop of the CV industry anywhere between 25 to 28%. There's another consultancy company called CARE, which has forecasted an even more bleaker figure of the industry contracting by about 30 to 35%. Now, typically what is confronting us? What are the barriers or what are the issues which are coming in the way? We all know that the lockdown that we had since the month of April has had very, very terrible consequences. Basically, it has kind of killed the demand, so to speak. So there is extremely poor demand for commercial vehicles, so to speak. In fact, at the current level of the economy that we have, there is an oversupply of trucks, which would mean that the demand for new trucks is going to be extremely low. The second thing is that the financing availability has also become a big challenge. Financiers, whether they are private sector banks or whether they are nationalized banks or even NBFCs, they have become very apprehensive because of the ability of the existing customers to repay their loans, given the fact that the current economy is not doing too well at all. So they are extremely cautious about lending, and therefore this has become a big challenge for new truck sales to happen. Third is what we are seeing is that because of this lockdown and with business being low, two large stakeholders. One is the truck operators, truck and the bus operators, as well as the dealer channel partners. Their financial health and viability is becoming extremely vitiated. They are in various degrees of pain in terms of almost becoming bankrupt. I think this is something which I think the industry needs to take cognizance of. Last but not the least, as I said, that given the low demand and with the vehicles which are there, excess than what is required, there is a double whammy in the sense that the diesel rates have gone up. And I don't think, given the supply-demand situation, the truck rates or the revenues or the remuneration that the truck operators are expected to get are as vibrant to make them commercially viable. Third is that we also see that the small truck operators are getting jostled out of the space, and particularly post GST, when the input tax credit benefits are enjoyed more by the medium to large scale fleet operators. So these are some of the things that are confronting us. And what is it that we need to see in the near term? And what is it that we need to take a handle on? One is that the growth in the CV industry is going to be gradual. If at all we are going to see any pickup, it is expected to happen post the festival months, which in this year is going to start as early as August and probably go on till November. So we could see some amount of demand coming in as far as the demand is concerned. And as we have seen that the month of June was better than the month of July, the month of July would be better than the month of July, and so on. The only small caveat is that these sporadic lockdowns that various cities or various states have been imposing, particularly in the month of July, could be a spoilsport, because this would lead to cities being shut, containment zones not allowing people to travel and things like that. So this is going to be a near-term challenge for the automotive industry, and in particular the commercial vehicle industry as well. In this backdrop, we have seen that the LCVs and the SCVs, besides the ICVs, have done relatively better. And if I can see that these signs have been seen in the month of June, and I would think, well, let's wait for these figures for the month of July also to come, and I would imagine that it would certainly be better than the month of June. So this is going to be a positive, and this is typically riding on the fact that online ordering, the e-commerce sites, the need for perishables which need to be transported, and of course the last mile deliveries, particularly of the perishables, will require more and more trucks, particularly of the SCV and the LCV categories, to grow. I think this segment is expected to be better than the other segments, so to speak. The worst in this category would be the buses, basically. And buses, typically the school season has gone by, and now with the expectation of social distancing to be there, and I would think that travel by public transport is going to be a challenge. And I would think that buses would continue to struggle for most part of this year, if not for the entire financial year. Coming to MNHCVs, even within MNHCVs, we are seeing that particularly the tippers in the soft mining, and probably now if more and more investment is going to be done by the government in infrastructure, we would find that the tippers would grow. And of course, we have seen the high-end tippers also growing really in a good manner, which is basically the 8x4 category tippers. So this segment is going to be the silver lining for the MNHCV segment. The only one other segment that could probably add to the MNHCV volumes is basically the e-commerce segment, where the 4x2 trucks are being used for e-commerce. This could probably also give an impetus to the MNHCV, particularly in the 18,000 kg GVW segment, 18.5 ton GVW segment, so to speak. Now, what are the strategies that the companies need to take? And of course, they're already taking, is that for them, demand generation is the number one priority. And in this era of where travel is not permitted and social distancing norms are being enforced, companies have taken to digital sales in a really big way. And I think the car companies have been reasonably successful in this, and I would imagine that the CV industry will catch up very, very soon. as more and more people start interacting on the digital media, so to speak, and do the sales. We also see that the BS6 sales are currently at a fairly low level, and I think most BS6 OEMs are going all out through the digital media in terms of promoting their BS6 strengths. And in particular, we are seeing that they are focusing on their BS6 USPs. And the primary one, which I think they are trumpeting, is basically the connected vehicles, which is where they are saying that the telematics-driven connected vehicles will improve the uptime of the vehicle, and therefore it would mean that it's a higher profitability for the customers. So let's wait and see. Hello. Thank you very much, Rajesh, for compiling the July figures of the CV industry together. I think it's been done very well. In this section, I will walk through our audience in terms of the analysis of the figures which have been put together. At the outset, the month of July has been definitely encouraging, better than that of the month of June. The entire industry, which includes going right up till Maruti Super Carry, I think the industry has gone up to about 34,200 units, up from about 25,969 units of the previous month, which is approximately a growth of about 45%, which I think is quite encouraging, but we are still not yet out of the woods. If you only look at the month of July, I think the month of July to July, which is July 2020 versus July 2019, the degrowth has been about 47%. This, of course, is much better than the 67% degrowth that was there on a June 20 versus June 19. So let's come to the bellwether of the CV industry, which is the MNHCV trucks, which is essentially trucks which are 18.5 tons GVW and above. It is the largest segment by far. And this segment has had a sequential growth, which would mean that the month of July has grown over the month of June by about 35%, which I think is very, very much needed. However, there's much more to happen. If you really look at how it was YTD June, I think the YTD June MNHCV degrowth was almost 93% vis-a-vis the last year. And YTD July, now that has come down to about 88%. Only the month of July, I think the degrowth vis-a-vis July 19 has been to the extent of about 65%, which means that month on month we are catching up. If we were to look at what are the silver lining within the MNHCV industry, and if you really analyze the MNHCV segment-wise, 44% of the trucks sold in the month of July, which I think were to the extent of about 3,895 units, were tippers. 45% were tippers. This was followed by the 4x2 segment, which is about 24%, and about 26% is multi-axle vehicles. This is how the composition of the sale of the month of July, which is a total of about 3,895 units. And the month of June 2020, we had a sale of about 2,871. So the key segments that I just mentioned are the tippers, which would mean the 4x2 tippers, the 6x4 tippers, and the 8x4 tippers that are doing well as the 4x2 segment, which is basically the 18.5 ton GVW trucks, basically, so to speak. And then coming to the other important segment, which is growing extremely well, is the small commercial vehicle. Now here we have seen that the degrowth YTD has come to about 66%, which is down from about a degrowth in YTD June 2020 of about 77%. And YOY July figures, if I were to compare, let's say, the July 20 versus the July 19 figures of the small commercial vehicle, I think the drop has been only about 29%, which means that this is the actually the fastest moving or the fastest growing segment within the MNHCV. And of course, in this segment, you have vehicles like the Tata Ace, the Ashok Leyland Dost, the Mahindra Bolero pickup, and of course the Isuzu models which are there in this particular space. So this space is doing extremely well, and no prices for guessing. It is basically the last mile deliveries, the e-commerce, all of that is fueling this demand in a good way, and of course the rural demand as well. Now coming to the other segment which is doing reasonably well is the LCV industry. And if we were to look at this industry, I'm talking about the 5 to 15 ton or now the 16.2 ton GVW segment. Now this industry has done reasonably well. The YTD or the YOY July, which would mean the July 20 versus the July 19 numbers, I think the industry degrowth has been only about 58%. So, and within this entire 5 to 15 ton GVW segment, the largest segment, of course, is the ICV, which would be typically the 12 ton to almost 16.2 or 17 ton GVW, so to speak. I think this segment is doing extremely well. Coming to the last segment, which is buses, I think this is one segment where either the small buses, which is basically up till the 12 ton GVW segment, they aren't doing well, nor are the bigger buses, which is the 15 ton HCB as what we call it, are doing well. Now here the degrowth of July 20 versus July 19 still continues to be at a very large percentage, about 82%. And as just mentioned that even the YTD figures are not looking so good. YTD July, the bus segment is almost 94% behind last year YTD July, so to speak. And this is predominantly because of the fact that the entire school bus season, which is typically between the months of April to June or if not July, is literally behind us. And I think we can really forget that the school bus season is going to come anytime this year. I think we can only hope for something to happen in the next fiscal year. Now coming to looking at some of the things we can anticipate for the month of August. The month of August has the first of the festivals coming in, which is the Ganesh Chaturthi, which happens towards the last week of August. I think the festival season kicks in with that particular festival, so we can expect some amount of festival fervor to drive in sales, and predominantly I would imagine that it would be in the light and medium duty and in the SCV segment. The second important thing is that the Unlock 3.0 has just kicked in, and we would expect that more and more businesses getting started would increase the number of inquiries. The million-dollar question, of course, is that whether the government will announce the scrappage policy. I do hope that if it comes in, there would be some amount of positivity in the market. GST reduction was another demand from the industry. I think it is likely to remain a non-starter given the fact that the fiscal deficit that the government is running is almost at a 80% plus level in the period of April to June. So they have quite a lot of things to manage on the fiscal deficit front, and therefore I don't think the GST reduction would be acceded to by the government. The key challenge for the OEMs continues to be demand generation, and of course to make that happen in a better manner, I think OEMs will also need to work harder on the financing part. I think last month we did see one of the OEMs coming up with very innovative financing options for the truckers, basically not only in buying trucks but also in terms of managing their working capital as well. So I think which is a good thing. So some of the barriers or the showstoppers which we could potentially see is that the multi-axle segment is not growing as fast as it should. We do believe that there is a certain oversupply of trucks, and then of course until the demand, which is basically in terms of demand of cargo or trucks which are required to ferry products are required more and more, I don't think the haulage segment is going to see growth in a hurry, really, so to speak. And the other negative thing which has happened is that the used truck market, we are seeing fairly high discounts. And my assessment is that some of the smaller players are wanting to get out of this business for the simple reason that business has become very difficult. the fuel rates have gone up. And of course, some of them could probably be in the moratorium period. So we'll have to wait and see. And that's another big thing that one needs to look at by the end of August in terms of how the moratorium play is going to be. Because we hear right now that in the month of July as well, financiers have been hesitating to fund customers, and particularly those who have utilized moratorium. Though, of course, many of the financiers who come up with the financial results, including the private sector banks, have said that their percentage of loans in the moratorium is quite low. And if that is so, I don't think this could potentially be an issue. But anyway, let's wait and see till the first week of September. And I think if the moratorium is going to be a non-issue, I think that is going to be a positive for the CV industry. As I said, financing is going to be absolutely key to the success in the month of August and then going forward. So I would like to end by thanking Rajesh once again for putting this presentation together. Thank you so much.